Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Russ Klein.
I appreciate the kind introduction, and I'm really pleased to see a group of esteemed marketers in the DFW trading area come together like this. Whether you're a member or not a member, it's awesome that you came out to be connected with your colleagues. And it's events like these that will actually more likely create inflection points in your career than anything you might do online or any training course you might take. It's the ability to experience the kind of connected intelligence that sits in this room right here. I was very flattered to be invited to talk about branding and storytelling. And it was somewhat ironic, though, because for the last couple of years, I have been on a rampage asserting that marketers are addicted to storytelling. And I still feel that way, and I will explain a little bit as to why. I'm a person who has some pretty strong beliefs about not only how in marketing, but why in marketing. They're beliefs that I love debating with people, and I try not to be certain, but I do have strong beliefs. And, you know, I'm always remember to be humbled. I have a place, a little place out in Steamboat Springs, which is kind of a cowboy town in Colorado. And I thought, you know, I grew up on a ranch in Ohio. It's time for me to get a pair of cowboy boots. So I went into a store in Colorado. If you know Colorado, it's called FM Light. It's basically like a Eddie Bauer outfitter for Western outfitters. And I walked in, and there was a salesperson there, a nice guy. He was like, "Sir, can I help you?" And I'm one of those people who likes to go in. I know what I want. I don't really need a lot of sales assistance, and so I don't like being over-serviced when I'm in those kinds of situations. He sort of followed me back. I said, "No, I got this." And then I'm sort of looking at boots for a while, and he comes back over, and he tells me his name. He said, "I'm going to be right over there if you need me." And he kind of stood back away, and I was feeling a little bit sort of like surveilled by him. He was sort of looking at me in a very concerned way, and I thought, what is up with this guy? And so finally, after a couple minutes, he came up to me, and he said, "Once again, I want to say my name is John, and the men's boots are over there." I was like, I knew that. So what I'm going to do today is try to set some context for you about the world, and you know, nothing is anything without context. So we'll start high and talk about some macro issues and get quickly into the 4 Ps. How many of you have been taught the 4 Ps of marketing? Raise your hand high if you have. Okay. So I want to give you a new way to think about the 4 Ps. They're still structurally sound. They've evolved, the service economy. They've become the 7 Ps, and there's all kinds of different spin on them. But I want to give yet a different look at the 4 Ps to you and what that means for branding and storytelling. Don't worry about taking notes here, because I'll make my deck available to the board here for the chapter, and I also have a takeaway, like a 2 or 3 page bullet point takeaway, which I can make available to you. So I just, because I feel bad when people are trying to snap photos, and I move quickly. I'm about to move very quickly, okay? So I want you to get ready for a little bit of energy when it comes to that. So one of the things that, as I said, I believe marketers have become addicted to storytelling. And I'm someone who's made a lot of my career around doing some pretty good storytelling for brands over the years. It's not that storytelling doesn't matter. It's not that it isn't good for building a brand. But I think content marketing has just put the needle in deeper to that addiction. And I'm concerned that marketers are trying to solve too many different problems, thinking they can do it just through storytelling. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about why on that. But as part of the work I've been doing the last few years, I've created this mathematical equation that's really a conceptual equation that a brand in the 21st century is the experience to the power of story. And we'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that. But let's think about, I was in Shanghai when we introduced Gatorade 30 some years ago when it was this, and now was back recently to see this. This was just 24 years. 24 years of change, how fast change is going. How is it that the largest accommodation provider, the largest transportation provider, the largest retailer, the largest media company essentially have no hard assets? Think about that. You think about the Fortune 500, 50% of the Fortune 500 has disappeared since the year 2000, fallen off the list. And over 60% of the Fortune 500 has been on that list for just about 7 years. Think about the change. You get run over if you're not agile and making progress and growing in your own way. Look at this MarTech landscape. I'm not a MarTech guy, so don't ask me MarTech questions. But I wanted to just show this slide here again for perspective of how complex, in some ways, the attempt to simplify marketing has become, right? And today's toddlers think a magazine is an iPad that doesn't work. It's like a whiplash. And there's a great book called Whiplash, written by one of the authors is from MIT's Media Lab, a think tank. But it is a veritable a whiplash out there, not only in terms of the rate of speed, but the changes in directions, the retracing in some cases of our progress, and it's important for us to stay agile in terms of understanding how quickly this world around us is in fact changing. Cultural and marketing trends and issues are in a cauldron of a stew pot where so many things are at work, and it represents great opportunity for marketers. Because if you're smart and you're trying to build a contextual understanding for your brand, you want to try to drop yourself in the middle of some of these trends and issues and be part of a solution for your customer. And you can go even more into from macro to micro. It's a great book by Mark Penn, Micro Trends Squared. And each chapter devoted to each one of these themes, single with pet, which I was up until very recently. Not because I don't have my pet, but because I'm getting married. So but these small themes, I'm sure if you just let your eyes drift to one or two of them, you could smile and say, yeah, I kind of know that one. I've observed that one. And it's important, again, for a marketer to be swimming in all of these trends, to be current in all of these trends. What I've done is I've actually created a summary of 21st century tensions, because there's all these themes, which I just showed you earlier, but then there are many of them that are at odds with one another. And the reason I point out these tensions is because that's where the opportunity is. That's where the opportunity is, by the way, for great storytelling. Tension is at the source of great storytelling, and it's also at the core of business opportunity. Understanding the push-pull dynamic of all of these things at work and finding constructive solutions to drop your brand in the middle of them. The customer journey, it's no longer the sequential hierarchy of effects that was invented 60-some years ago by an AMA professor. Instead, it's become this pretzel now, and it goes in all directions. And in fact, Don Schultz at Northwestern University said, there may be no such thing as a customer journey, right? And think about this. What does this say to you? No middleman. If you are an intermediary in the marketplace and you're not adding value, there's a target on your back. You better understand that, because the world is trying to move intermediaries out. The only thing two people can agree on these days is what to do with a third person. Could be you. The algorithm will see you now. 85% of customer interactions will be managed without human intervention by 2020. 30% of search is now not even using screens. Talking is the new search. Listening is the new reading. You have to wrap your head around a whole new set of constructs, don't you? This is where I want to talk to you about the 4 Ps and how the 4 Ps why it's important to look at them differently now. And there are 4 things that actually happened. These are things I've observed over time that I think are good markers for why we need to look at the 4 Ps differently. First off, e-commerce. We know how prevalent e-commerce has become. The next is the idea of user experience. Steve Jobs' design guy, I can't remember his name, in 1993, it wasn't all that long ago, 1993 coined the term user experience. That's when user experience became a thing. And at that time, of course, it was a digital user experience that they were concerned about. Well, now we're concerned about a digital physical user experience. And then the advent of social media. Who knows, by the way, what it is that powers social media out there? What is the real power of social media? Take Facebook as a great example. What is that? Insecurity? Okay, that's all right. So that's actually a great answer, but it's not the answer. So connectedness. Okay. Addiction. There is an addiction. There certainly is. All right. So a lot of folks don't think about this very often, but Facebook actually, on Wall Street, they value their company using a model called Metcalfe's Law. You all know what Metcalfe's Law is? Troy? If you had a telephone and you were the only person in the world who had a telephone, how valuable would it be? Not very valuable. As soon as Maria gets one, value goes up, and on and on. It's called the network effect. It's the law of utilities, their Metcalfe's Law. That's what powers Facebook. It's the soft side of the law of utilities, and it's actually the construct they use to value the firm. So that's number 3. And then number 4 as a marker is the advent of Starbucks. Now, I was around when Starbucks really was just popping up, starting to pop up on corners, and watched it actually get built on experience only. Starbucks did essentially no advertising, no storytelling whatsoever. And in my mind, that was the first high-profile example that proved you could build a brand with experience and not really worry about storytelling. Now, it doesn't mean storytelling wasn't going on out there, but they weren't taking any real role in that story other than delivering an experience. And when I think about Starbucks, I also come quickly to think about the idea of a ritual. How many of you all have rituals? Raise your hands. What would be an example of a ritual you have? Coffee in the morning, right? Everybody showers, I assume, every morning. So, there's rituals with a big R, like the Army-Navy game. There's ritual of the Texas-Oklahoma game. That would be a ritual with a big R. People look forward to it. It's got a grandiosity to it and so forth. But there's rituals with little R's, like coffee every morning, or coffee on Sunday afternoon at Starbucks, perhaps in a Wall Street Journal. And the importance about a ritual is that what is the difference between a ritual and a habit? Intention? Meaning. Who said meaning? Ding, ding, ding. It is meaning. Ritual has meaning. A habit, not necessarily so. And so when you can build your brand to become a ritual, that's when you have reached the pinnacle of your customer relationship. That's when you reach the pinnacle of being a profitable brand. If you can become a ritual with either a big R or a little r. And I actually have a lot of work product and another presentation. I could spend the whole day talking to you about rituals and how to go about building a ritual for your brand. Now, as much as I think rituals is a great marketing concept, like anything else, marketers are late for everything, about 27,000 years too late. Where was the first intentional experience design? Prehistoric religion. Now, you can, whether you're secular, non-secular, whether you want to talk about the ritual as something that's positive or maybe not so positive, there's no question there was intentional experience design. And intentionality is one of the first watchwords around experience design that I want to talk to you about. The lighting, the aroma, the use of negative space, genuflecting, subordinating yourself. How about the confessional? You're in a confessional and it's dark and there's light on the other side and you're separated from it. All the symbolism that goes on, very intentional experience design. I'm doing work on this, going back, looking at religions and trying to draw out practices that can be used for marketers in a constructive way, right? Because rituals, of course, some would argue back in that day were used to control people. And we certainly don't want to try to control people. We want to understand how we can become a ritual that is a positive and helpful, useful experience for a customer. And so, yes, ritual is, in fact, the idea of meaning. And if you can go from my original concept of a brand equals the experience to the power of story, if you can become a ritual, you're an Uber brand. You become an Uber brand ritual to the power of story. So, let's talk about the 4 Ps here real quick. It's not product anymore. What is it? What is it? Personalization. It's a good guess. I'm sure it wasn't a guess. I made that sound like you didn't give it any thought. Sorry. Solutions. Think solutions. Why? Because nobody wants your product. How many of you are brand owners here? How many of you help another brand owner drive their business in some way? Okay? You have to tell that brand owner in a very sober conversation, the customer doesn't want your product. Get over it. I've seen so much self-love of brands in my day, probably responsible for some of it myself. Make the logo bigger, so much self-love on brands that we forget that nobody wants your product. They want the solution that your product or service generates. And if you think about innovation from that standpoint, it'll change your whole view, right? If Henry Ford didn't start thinking differently, all we would have would be faster horses, right? That's what we'd be. We'd continue to say, well, this is the product. Just make these horses faster. The most important core idea around a solution in today's world is usefulness. It's a simple word, but it's not to be taken lightly. People have become like kids playing with toys at a table. If one breaks, they just drop it and they pick up the next one. They have no sentimental attachment whatsoever. And this idea of an irrational loyalty to something, brand loyalty has been declining steadily since World War II. Brand loyalty to me is not even an objective anymore. It should really be brand trust. I think that's really the gateway into a relationship with a customer in today's world. And so this is a hierarchy of solutions. And again, this might seem very straightforward, but I'm going to give you a little wrinkle on this in a moment. But functionality, does it work? Is it going to work? Is it going to work over and over again? And then when you're designing solutions, is it usable? Is your solution usable? 3 components. Is it learnable, easy to learn, easy to remember, and error tolerant? I want you to think about those 3 things. Learnable, easy to remember, and error tolerant. Think about your own brand, your own product or service for your customer who tries to transact and acquire your service or product. Is that experience and that transaction easy to learn, easy to remember, and error tolerant? How many of you have microwaves? Okay. What do you use your microwave for? Warm food. What are all these buttons for? This is a perfect example of over-design, and in my view, it's gone on for decades. And what else is it about this? If you press the wrong button, how error tolerant is it? I can't get out of this mode. I can't get out. Go get the pan. I'll heat it up on the stove. So here is actually a physical chronicling of TV remotes right up through today. This is the progress that remote control designers have made right up through today. Are these easy to learn? Are they easy to remember? Are they error tolerant? No. And they've been at this for decades. Thank goodness for voice, right? Voice activated. That's now how I can actually watch Netflix. I could just talk to Alexa, which is a whole other set of stories that are kind of funny. Solution design. So now I want you to flip your switch, again, not product design anymore, not service design, but solution design. Orient yourself every day to the idea of solution design. And here are some interesting solution designs I just plucked for you. These are award-winning solutions. An armrest table, a baby shower cap. Here's a rollable bench, so like if a bird flies by and on it, you can just roll the spot and roll it underneath. An umbrella and a cup holder. How many of you, particularly if you're in the city, struggled, you got your coffee and you got your case and you're How about this? Who likes to spend $50 on a candle every time you go out? I love candles. This is a great idea. It's a reusable candle. It just keeps burning, melts back down, you flip it, and you use it again. Is that not, that's a solution, right? That's not somebody trying to sell more candles. They're trying to sell a solution to you. I have a little dog named Nacho, and he would love this, so I'm actually going to try to find this online. But it's a solution, right? Here's one. A lot of people will tell me that they don't understand what I'm talking about when I say this, because when I eat pasta, I can't get my pasta to stay on the fork, and like I'm using spoons and everything. I'm trying to spin the fork and everything. And every time I tell a group like this, I have this problem and everything, they kind of go, well, I don't have that problem. Like, come on. You all have that problem, right? You've had that problem, right? So, perfect solution, a twister fork. Stays on. Just jam this thing into a piece of fruit and you've got a citrus sprayer. Great solution. How about this? How many of you have closets or basement areas in your home or your parents' homes where there's all these piles of rolls of wrapping paper and they're ripped and torn and moldy and you don't know which ones are which, and this is one customizable any occasion gift wrap. You just go in here and you find the occasion and you circle it. Is that not a perfect solution? You just need one roll of this in your closet. Throw all that other stuff away. How about this? Virgin America's app. There's a reason it's the most successful one in industry, because they decided to not do what the microwave people and the TV remote people do. They picked 3 things: check-in, boarding, flight alerts. Now, could it have done 50 other features? Yes, of course it could. Bless you. Of course it could. But it's not a positive, usable solution. This is a positive, usable solution. Nobody wants your product. Get over it. Get over it. Now, price. What has changed in the world today that might now be more valuable than price? That's super important, but that's under distribution. Price, time. And I can make a case that time is actually now more valuable. When you think about all of the solutions that are coming to market today, they're in one way or another saving you time. And it's obviously the one resource that's not renewable. Particularly in an experience-oriented culture as it's becoming, time is very, very precious, and I think now should be the number one value component you think about when you're thinking about your solution. Yes, you want to make money, you need margins on your product, but don't worry about the price. Worry about how much time is my product or service saving. You might know Gary Vee. He makes this point about the importance of time. Can you, Troy, can you just flick his video there real quick?
You need to get very serious about sound. We care about only a couple things as people: money, health, religion. There's not a lot of things we really, really give a fuck about, but one of the things that we care about and always have, but now we're at an all-time high, is time. Anything that aligns you with the end consumer's time is an imperatively big advantage for you. We don't like friction. We don't like friction on our landing pages, and we don't like friction in our lives. Uber became a huge company by selling time.
Okay, so Gary Vee is, by the way, kind of a fun person to follow. It has some very provocative ideas around marketing, but there's no question, when you look across all the literature on customer failure, the number one source of annoyance is you've wasted my time. You've wasted my time. Google understands this. Now, if Google were an old school brand, they would say, someone's coming to my homepage. I want to keep them there so they're staring at my logo as long as possible. But no, they don't. They invest millions, even billions, shaving off milliseconds because what they want to do is get you to your solution. They know that's their solution for you, is to get out of the way as fast as they can. And understanding that. And not just kind of going, well, could we leave it on for an extra beat so they, our brand awareness needs to be higher or whatever. It's like, okay. How about this? This solution here, hourglass traffic lights. How many of you think that a yellow light means step on the gas, right? Well, now you can time it to precision here because you can watch the yellow drain. The interesting thing about this solution, though, is it goes to a mindset that people not only want to save time, they love counting time and marking time, right? And so the ability to now count time, the driver happiness in this city where this thing was piloted was the stress levels were markedly reduced because people just felt like they were in control again because they got to keep track of their time. What comes next? Place. I'll go right to the answer. It's omni-channel. Place is omni-channel. And, poor distribution, not product, Peter Thiel says, is the number one cause of failure. And it's true. I think that distribution of the 4 Ps has become actually the most important and the most powerful of the Ps. And it used to be the one that was least interesting to marketers. It wasn't as sexy. It's part of the reason why in many organizations marketers have lost responsibility for distribution. And I think of omni-channel as both media and sales channels. They are all kind of blurring together. We know the kind of convergence that happens at your telephone. And the power of context access, as the gentleman here pointed out, and immediacy has turned this P into the Cinderella of the 4 Ps. It is now the most important one, and one where you should be spending a lot of time. About most companies are in probably 8 different channels where they're able to get their highest yield. You don't have to be in all channels. You need to know which channels are delivering answers for you. Domino's, there are 10 different ways to order pizza. Think about that. They understand access, immediacy, and context. 10 different ways. Oh, and it's 11 if you add telephone. Go to promotion, participation. Participation. And I'll tell you what I mean by this. Participation is another, it helps me with my acronym, STOP. So participation is another proxy for engagement. And what is customer engagement? First of all, raise your hand high if you use this term in your day-to-day business. Customer engagement. Okay? So who can tell me what it is? Who would like to tell the rest of us what they believe customer engagement is? Because presumably, raise your hand if you measure it too. Okay, some of you. So some of you know you use it and you measure it. So what is it? I know you guys hate this. Like, what an ass. What an ass. He's up here just. What is it? Level of interaction. That's really great. What's your name? Chris, you're starting to come up with too many answers here, okay? So, oh, damn it. Plant. All right. Okay. All right. So, the technical, the true term that describes customer engagement is there has to be a transaction and an indirect transaction or participation, meaning you get a like, a post, a share, feedback, user-generated content, followers, as Chris said. So the thing about this is a transaction without participation is just a lonely cash register. It's just money, right? And participation without the transaction is just a bunch of people exchanging misinformation with one another out there. You need both. Both of these constitute, and only these two things, when they occur together, constitute customer engagement. And that's what you should be trying to measure with your firm. Not only how many widgets am I selling, but how many widgets am I selling in a process that is generating a participative dynamic with my customer. And the reason this is important is because high customer engagement equals high profitability, right? So it's not just for the heck of it. Now, I want to get into storytelling here real quick, a little bit more. Even though I think you all are addicted to storytelling, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about when I was at Foot Cone Building. I was responsible for worldwide advertising on Gatorade. And the CEO then came in new from Procter & Gamble, and he said, Klein, I want to know what system you're using to create effective advertising. I was like, oh, wow, Procter & Gamble, systems, and so forth. So in unpacking that a little bit more, he wanted to know what kind of process, what kind of planning, what kind of template, what kind of briefing, what kind of strategy documents are the world-class examples that have produced the most effective, and I say just great advertising in the world. So I spent months on this. I looked at account planning award winners. I looked at advertising award winners. I got sales data from cooperating companies. And the fact is, I couldn't come up with any one approach that seemed to yield great storytelling over and over again. And I was sort of disappointed in myself that I was not able to recognize some pattern. And then one day, I started thinking about this idea of tension from Freud. You know, without tension, there is no joke. And I went back and I looked at the great ads, the ads that were high recall, high memorability, generated sales results. And the brief, no matter what the brief, how it was written, there was a source of tension in the advertising. And even when it wasn't in the brief, the creative person found the source of tension. And so the reason when Bob Morrison asked me to do this, the exciting part for me was, well, now we can start to institutionalize making sure that there is a tension-based insight in every piece of advertising we create. And we won't, so upstream, instead of hoping that we can have somebody save our bacon in the creative process, we'll arm the creative team with a consumer insight that is tension-based, that's relevant and tension-based. There cannot be great storytelling without the use of tension. Think about all of the archetypal stories, the 7 ways that a story can be told. Every one of them has an underlying source of tension in them. And why would your storytelling be any different for a brand? It wouldn't. The force of tension has got 3 characteristics. It's at the nexus of the customer, the context, and the brand. And I was working on Gatorade at the time, and I happened to be reading this book. We were trying to figure out, sharpen up, what is the tension around Gatorade's transaction, doing all these ethnographies. Page 46, I remember when I was reading this, there was a quote, father taking his son fishing, as a third-party narrator said, if David catches this fish, there'll be something inside him for all his life, and it will make everything else easier. What was it that was going to be inside him? Confidence. Confidence. And it was that I started to do more work on. Rosabeth Moss-Kanter did a book on teams in all sorts of sports, on winning streaks and losing streaks, and the role that confidence played in all of them. And as a result, this was the new campaign.
Stay up. And what makes what goes down? Get back up. Whatever it is, it ain't physics.
And the Is It In You campaign ran for about 12 years. Actually, when Pepsi bought Gatorade, a new CMO came in there and killed the campaign. And then I think sales dropped 30% over the next 2 years. And they came back with a new campaign that looked very similar to this campaign. Tapping in, though, to that mindset. And so the point here, again, not only about being intentional on experience design, which I can rant about for a long time, but being intentional in your creative process of identifying the source of tension involved at the nexus of the context, the customer, and your brand, your solution, right? And I can go on, talk about Whopper Freakout, which was the highest recalled piece of advertising ever measured by Nielsen, IAG at the time, based on a brief that we used using tension. And the idea was, I'm not going to play it, but because I want to respect your time. The idea behind it was very simple. We had heavy users of our Whopper, the real Whopper lovers, go without a Whopper for 30 days and to keep a diary and take pictures. And it was amazing because these users were like bordering, I shouldn't use the word lightly, but like suicidal because they couldn't get their Whopper. And you got to see the other things they were eating instead. And it would surprise you, it wasn't like a Big Mac or something. It was like a box of Triscuits or things like that. Really interesting, and mostly guys, yep. And so our brief was, when you have a taste for a Whopper, nothing else will do. And so what did we do? We removed the Whopper from our restaurants in Arizona, and we filmed it. And we filmed it. And so it was an award-winning, I think it won the Titanium Lion at Cannes, and really successful for the products as well. There are other examples that I use, in a workshop setting. I would share these with you. Groupon, the haves and the have-dones. Maybe just show this one real quick. This is a great example. You guys tell me what the source of tension was.
People in this world. The haves and the have-dones. Haves, have-dones. Haves, have-dones. At Groupon, we applaud the have-dones. For they know what they've done. They will always have. If you're going to own something, own the experience. Groupon.
I know that campaign is very effective. A friend of mine runs the agency for it. What's the underlying tension there? It's not about stuff anymore. Yeah, it's right. And so you could say, oh, well, any creative could just come up with that idea. Well, that's true. But if you know that it resonates with your customer, why would you not move it upstream into your strategy statement so that all the future advertising that's created is powered by that same insight, right? That's what strategy is. That's how strategy came about when it was first invented in the military. Somebody said, hey, we just won this battle. How did we do it? Let's go back and rebuild. How did we do that? How do we get great advertising? We locate a source of tension at the nexus of the customer, the context, and our brand. This is probably, I have to play this, and then I promise I'll end up.
My buddy, my pal, my friend. And I love you all.
It's not just the miles in life. It's what you make of them.
Love. It's what makes a Subaru a Subaru.
Okay, so there is an underlying tension here, which is what? What is it? It's not just a car. This is my life that we're carrying around here, right? And if you're a dog lover, I mean, I I actually, if I were in my own family room, I would cry at this commercial. I love it so much, and I just dread the day I'll lose my dog. So, but underlying great advertising, Southwest is another great example. La Quinta, another great example. We know that the research shows us that when you try to make people feel instead of think, it's more attention-getting, more memorable, more persuasive, more emotional, more even effective in communicating facts if you can make people feel. And the best way to charge up somebody is to put your thumb on the wound, as they say, or find that source of tension, and then let your solution, your brand, be the discharge of that tension in the advertising. So those are the 4 Ps. You can stop using the old 4 Ps, and you can start using the new 4 Ps. Solutions, time, omni-channel, and participation. And that's your value proposition. So end your addiction to storytelling. Brand equals the experience to the power of story. Close on this example. A friend of mine was my direct report at Burger King in charge of business intelligence, and he went on to become president of Carrabba's, which I think started in Houston. And Mike was so excited. He was telling me about a new campaign that they had. We were over dinner. He said, the new campaign is the founder's story. Johnny Carrabba. He's going to talk about, how it was founded. And I looked at Mike across the table. I was like, oh. Does the world waiting for another founder's story, Mike? I mean, seriously? Nobody wants your product. Do you understand that? You have to keep that mindset. And I said, you need to build your brand through experience design, not through storytelling. So why don't you have Johnny Carrabba tell part of the story and leave the rest of the story to your servers to finish with people in the restaurant? And they started doing that in a couple restaurants. Now they've rolled it out into a division. And so they flipped storytelling, his addiction to storytelling, into experience design to the power of story. See what I mean when I say that? Experience is what really mattered there. With that, I'm going to close up. Again, I could talk with you guys forever about this stuff, and I appreciate your patience. Any questions? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mitch. A lot of what you're talking about has to do with successful interaction by the end users. And so it brings to mind disciplines like account planning, usability tests, information architecture, and indeed some of the most effective advertising that's created has been done so because people who are like-minded to the audience help participate in its creation so that it resonates with them. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to some of the examples you provided and the role of the target audience in helping to create the experience and create the messaging?
Sure.
Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you. Well, so the 20th century formula for a brand used to be a brand equals the promise plus the experience. And I think for 60 or so years, marketers were doing a lot of promise making, not a lot of promise keeping, not much focus on the experience element at all. When social media came into play and the network-based world we're in came into play, now you became not the only person telling your story. You can say you don't want to invest in advertising, but somebody else will do your advertising for you if you don't want to. Your competitors, your critics, the people if you might go on strike in your organization or something. There are all kinds of stories swirling around out there about your brand. And so the question is, do you want to, again, try to shape it to the extent you can? And what's been part of this interactive world has been the opportunity for co-creation that Mitch points out, which is really stems from design thinking skills, design thinking concepts. Very close, high empathy, high interaction with your design target. And actually design targeting is something my team at Burger King created with Bain back in 2003, which was to apply design targeting skills to conventional segmentation. Co-creation figured very prominently into our Whopper Freakout campaign because we were interacting with these guys that were keeping their diaries. The Is It In You campaign was also very much a co-created validation process. We spent a lot of time on football fields and courts and locker rooms and that sort of thing. And the idea behind design targeting is that you play to your core. There's most of the literature out there says that the core is usually people abandon their core much too quickly, thinking that they're seduced to some light user or medium user or some competitive user. Go to your core, put your arms around them in a very high empathy design thinking process, and allow them a seat at the table of co-creation. Now you need to draw the line because you're not going to expertise them. You're not going to do your job for you. But being that kind of intimacy in the process is really very common now in creating great experience design, certainly, and great storytelling as well. Does that help? Yep.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. My name is Amanda Domas, and I know you said not to take notes, but I can't help myself. You talked about brand loyalty has been declining since World War II, and now we should be turning to brand trust. Can you talk a little bit about brand trust and maybe an example of a company that has lost brand trust or has come back from losing brand trust?
Oh, there are probably a lot of the same examples that you might cite. I mean, I think Facebook is going through some ups and downs, recently around trust and privacy and, the whole fake news thing. And so I think, and they are trying to coalesce the market into basically a position of trust. Again, you have situations like Chipotle where there's a foodborne, bacteria or something that created a germ, and so they had to close their restaurants down, and the hygiene came into question around food preparation and so forth in their supply chain. So, usually when you lose somebody's trust, unless it was for malice, if it was just an accident, you have to go through a very transparent process, much like the co-creation process. You have to get back in with your core customer, and you have to work your way back into their graces, follow their lead. They'll help you know when the right time is to say what to say and when to say it. And probably inform you on the kinds of actions you need to take to rebuild trust. Trust is really still a very difficult thing to build for a brand, and some would say it's sort of the antecedent to brand loyalty. But everything I've seen shows that trust is really the inflection point when you are in consideration for a purchase or an acquisition. One of the things that I also wanted to say is you all have got so much more access to data now than you've ever had before, and that's really great. What I want to say, though, is if you're spending more of your time and money on data in order to sell your brand to your customer, then you are designing a superior experience for them. Shame on you. So think about the power you have with the data. Instead of worrying about like when to zap somebody with an email, to find them in a place where you can sell them. And yes, you're in business to sell. But in my view, experience design will evolve into a world where nothing is bought. Everything is sold. And that solution providers are just out there making customers aware of their superior solutions, hopefully, wrapped in hopefully an enchanting story or a compelling story. But I think there's an ethics issue around how to use data, going forward. So that's a whole other issue you caused me to think about when I was thinking about Facebook and data and so forth. But trust, is a. What are some other examples you guys can think of, top of my head? Volkswagen, yeah. What did they do? Oh, that's right, the fuel, yeah. So did they break your trust? Did that break your trust? Would you never consider a Volkswagen again because of that? Oh, you have them. And how are you disillusioned because that happened? I'm disappointed. Yeah. You didn't sell your car or anything? No. Yep. No. Right. Okay. Well, we all are principled in different ways. Yep.
Three-part question. Based on your experience, you can follow this. You're a smart guy, Russ. Good presentation, by the way. Based on your experience at Leo, and then you mentioned FCB.
Yep.
How did that form your work as a CMO? That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, tell us just a little bit about how much fun it was working with Alex. And number three, if you had to do it all over again, would you spend that much time on the client side?
Oh, wow. So, well, it built empathy, first off, because if anybody here is an agency or is a supplier or you have a customer, sometimes customers are not nice. There are it's true. Even Leo Burnett, which was famous for firing clients really over its history who were not nice people. You still run into people who don't understand, fundamental human decency and how to treat people. And so I don't think I needed that lesson per se, but it certainly heightened my feeling that if I ever did go to the client side, I had no designs to go to the client side when I was actually offered the job. I thought I would never leave Leo Burnett, and I loved it there. But the perspective I gained was just more empathy and how to treat an agency and how to involve an agency as a partner and again treat people like humans. I saw this. There's this great quote from a district attorney who was formerly a defense attorney, criminal defense attorney, and he said that he became a prosecutor because he felt he could keep more innocent people out of jail as a prosecutor than as a defense attorney. And I thought that was fascinating. And I thought, you know what? I think I can get more good work done as the decision maker, as a CMO, than I can as the person trying to recommend, right? Same dynamic. And it's true. So that part I loved about the client side. I loved both sides of it. I mean, there are so many positives on both sides of it. And at the end of all of it, it comes down to people. People usually don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. If you work for somebody who doesn't treat you decently and it's not inspiring and you dread going to the office, it doesn't matter what kind of so-called world-class company you're working with or what industry even. So I've learned to value, from my moves, just the importance of people, and I try to spend a day a week at least on people in my job, that's I think getting lost out there, unfortunately. Did I cut all three? Alex. Oh, Alex. Alex, working with Alex was a fiery. We had a fiery relationship. It was like riding a rocket with Alex Bogusky, but it was good. It was always positive intent. He did try to resign the account a couple times over some disagreements we had, but you were able to work it out. Alex is a very principled guy. He's very soft-spoken. He's not a promoter. Even though he became sort of this legend, he really isn't a self-promoter at all. You can't even give the guy an award and get him to show up anywhere. He just doesn't like that stuff. But Alex was a guy who believed in experience design before it even came into focus for me. You think about the work that CPB does, and like Domino's, the work they do for Domino's, they basically are creating experiences, and then they're using story to power, right, those experiences, all the various things you see in Domino's advertising. But he is, it's hard for anybody to live up to their legendary status. He comes close. He really is that good. He really does. He's prolific. When he's engaged, he's prolific. He left because he didn't feel like he could be engaged anymore. Now he's back. So it'll be interesting to see what his renaissance looks like. Yeah. Good. He's a good guy. Yeah.
All right. I think we are about out of time. Want to be respectful of everyone's time to get you back where you need to go. please, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Mr. Russ Klein.